Hello, this is High Priestess Tehila from the Coven of the Open Mind, and this is Intro to Magical Disciplines, Episode 3. Today we're going to talk about necromancy. Necromancy comes from Greek, necro meaning death, mancy meaning magic, so it is death magic. Now, if you remember back to some of the previous videos where we talked about the planes of existence and where these sources of energy come from, death energy is part of the quad form deity, so it comes from the plane of existence that's directly above of the double lower dimension. So you have our plane of existence where we have the four elements and spirit active, which links us through spirit passive to the spirit plane of existence, which is directly above ours. Kind of like the flip side of ours. So if you've seen Stranger Things, it's kind of like the upside down. That way of thinking about a death energy is very good, I'd say. That it is a dichotomy, life or death. You're either alive or you're not alive. Those are the options. There's no in between. So there really is only two options. And you could think about, death energy being like the same, world as life energy, except that everything is different. So that's about the only thing in the show that is remotely related to this, but very interesting way of thinking about it right there. So if you want to think of how you can visualize death energy, that's one way to do it. It's a plane directly above ours, but like I said, it's kind of like the flip side of ours. Above that, you have deity. Deity is quad form, right? So you have life versus death, and masculine versus feminine, where again, it's more aggressiveness versus nourishing and receptivity. So you have these four fundamental forces, and whatever kind of magic you're doing is like putting a marker somewhere in this square. So if you're pulling from, the necromancy, you're pulling from death down here and an equal amount of masculine and feminine, or one more of the other, depending on your own personal preferences, your own personal practices. Doesn't really matter. So, death energy. That's where it comes from. Plane of deity. It is the force of sorrow, loss, suffering, things that on the surface appear to be evil. Okay, you would want to say that death is evil, but it isn't. Death is a part of the circle of life. It is a necessary part of being a living, embodied being. At times you will not be embodied. And when you're not embodied, you exist outside of time. So what does that mean? That doesn't make sense, right? Because the death energy is only spirit exists there, so it's not subject to the same rules of time as our plane of existence where we have physical bodies. If this is like really, let it go in one ear and out the other. But so the idea is that when you're dead, you're still alive at the same time. You're both alive and dead at the same time. I know I'm contradicting myself from a moment ago in a very particular abstract sense. Let's put it that way. But so when you're trying to tap into the energy of someone who's passed on, they may have already reincarnated. But that won't prevent you from being able to tap into their energy. However, if they have reincarnated, then their reincarnation will lose some of its life energy to you when you pull the life energy to you if you're binding. And that's why they say you're not supposed to bind a spirit without permission. There are many people who think that all death magic, all necromancy is black magic. And that's just, it's kind of like short-sighted. Working with ghosts so that you can help bring people up peace when their loved ones have passed on suddenly and without notice is certainly not black magic. If someone's experiencing a haunting and you're trying to help them out, that's not black magic. Now, if you're trying to summon evil spirits so that they can stalk your ex-lover, yeah, okay, maybe that's black magic. I'll leave it to you to decide what is and isn't okay. And so does the author of this really awesome book that I've been glancing over at, The Witch's Book of the Dead. If you're really interested in necromancy, this is the book to start with. This is written by Christian Day. He's he comes off a little pompous at times, I'll say, but I do think he really knows his stuff. And I think that this is probably the most comprehensive and well-organized compendium on death magic that exists. It's written specifically for witches, which is nice, but remember, witches don't necessarily mean Wiccan, so there's no moral statement anywhere in his book. He basically says, you should do what you feel is right. I'm just giving you the tools to learn how to do these arts. Okay, so some of the stuff in there you might not want to do, and some of it you might. Some of it's just about divination with it. Some of it's, so it's all different sorts of things, and you just have to decide to, take what you need and leave the rest. But it's a really good book. He gets you started. He even goes over very basic initiation for people who are completely new to the craft. Like this is their first book. That's like what the Death Pact is in the first, or I think it's like the third chapter. He gives a good history of necromancy and where it comes from and why it's taboo in the first place. It's a really good read. So a few things about death energy that I want to cover. This is obviously really high level. So I've explained to you now how to get started. I've explained a little bit about what death energy is in the Kabbalistic sense. Death energy is that which causes decay and waning. Okay, it's mutable energy, but from the decay and the waning, you get life. So through death comes life. And it aligns with the dark moon. Most people who are called to a path of necromancy are born under new moons. I was born under a new moon, and I was called to the path at a relatively young age. So that holds true for me even as well. Many people are born mediums. A medium is someone who is, medium way, right? So they're like a little higher up. They're very spirit. So their primary element is probably spirit. Most people's primary elements are one of the four, earth, like our plane, Asiya plane of existence elements. And then you have some who have like spirit active, like they'll have spirit as their element. And these are often mediums, often born under new moons. Often people born under new moons as well don't feel like they belong here. They feel like they belong in the realm of the dead, like they were not supposed to be born. Many of them are suicidal, waning into the new moon. It's very common. It's very common. The first thing I look at if someone tells me they're suicidal, I look for that in their star chart right away. It's very common. Obviously not always, okay, but a lot of the time. Okay, so spirit energy, death energy, it can be thought of like a current. It's very Taoist. I love talking about streams. I try to keep my stream metaphors in check, but one day we'll talk about Taoism on here. But so you can think about it like a stream, like endless energy, and everyone just flows along. And this is where we get the river Styx from. And there's like this analogy of a river in many different mythologies from all over the world. And the idea is that when you're dead, you exist only in spirit, but you're only dead for, you're dead for a time, and then you come back to life. So there's this intricate relationship between your death and your life form that's kind of like a wave, if you like physics, okay? But we won't go there right now. So when you have a concentration of life energy, you have a living, breathing being. When you have an absence of life energy, you have a ghost, you have a haunting, you have concentrations of death energy that are high enough that even people who are not sensitive to death energy, who are not trained to work with it, notice. And you're not like seeing a physical thing walking around. This is why when people like take pictures and like, oh, you see it in the picture, I'm like, I don't know how that works. But you're feeling the energy, and then that's causing you to see things and hear things based on what's there. So am I saying that people who see ghosts are delusional? I mean, kind of, but I'll refer you back to my video on the difference between magic and delusion from the Wicca 101 Abridged series. Because in order to see the universe in its true form, you have to be willing to accept that there's a very fine line between seeing a world outside of time and space and reality and being literally crazy. So when you're perceiving of this at death energy, you're not really perceiving of a particular ghost. It's not like there's one evil old man who haunts this place. It's just that the death energy is continuing to flow in the same way it did when the person was alive, because it didn't have enough momentum to stop. It didn't wind down. It just, the person died very suddenly or something like that, and the energy just keeps flowing, and now it's just death energy. So death energy feels uncomfortable. It never stops feeling uncomfortable. You just get used to it if you work with it. It feels cold. Often people get cold. They'll get goosebumps. They'll feel like they're being watched. These are the key signs that someone is haunted. Ghosts very rarely go into people, but they can, especially very evil ones, especially if you're doing spirit bindings. It's not a good idea to bind ghosts unless you've communed with the ghost, you communed with the spirit, you know them well, you know exactly what's going to happen. And even then you have to be careful, because blood attracts both spirits and demons. And if you accidentally attract a demon and bring a demon into yourself, you're going to be having a bad time. So you have to be really sure that this ghost isn't lying to you. Like The Conjuring. The Conjuring, we just watched it last night. I never saw it before. Accurate. That's exactly how it works. A demon will just trick you into thinking it's some innocent, sweet little ghost and wants to live in a doll, and then he'll just like murder you and your entire family. Well, I mean, he won't murder you, right? He'll convince you to murder yourself and your entire family, because that's how demons work, okay? So that's how you can tell, there's like a slight difference between what happens when someone has a spirit nearby and when someone has a demon. If someone's being physically injured, not just like feeling uncomfortable, but bad, injured, acting differently, like in a very weird, erratic sort of way, then that you want to consider that there's a demon, and you have to handle those situations differently. A lot of the time, though, it's really just a ghost. It's usually just a ghost. Usually just death energy. Death energy is really common. It's everywhere that life energy is. Like it's everywhere. When someone does have spirit binding gone wrong, or they accidentally invoke a bad spirit, they'll have kind of hysteria or impulsive or self-harming behavior. So they'll be less inclined to harm others and more inclined to just be depressed, like they feel like they should be dead already. They could have violent outbursts and intensified emotions. Some people react that way to the feel of the emotion, but almost all of them have some sort of change of personality, voice, mannerisms. They might have increased strength or endurance, because the death energy does give you skills and energy, based on the energy of the people that you're invoking from the dead. You can gain new skills and speak in tongues and do things that you couldn't have otherwise done. So there are many reasons why you would want to bind a spirit. But it's important to be careful and to do it properly. And there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And obviously in this intro video, we don't have time to get into all the specifics. So I'll tell people how to get started working with spirits. If you're just getting started, all you want to do for now is what we call commune with spirits. You never want to bind a spirit that you haven't communed with first. There's a lot of reasons. One, if you haven't communed with the spirit, you don't know it's a spirit. It could be a demon. Biggest reason right there. Two, it could be belonging to a person who's currently incarnated, and you could be stealing their life energy from them in the process of working with their death energy, which sounds crazy, but remember, it's the same energy. And that will impact them in some way. And this actually results in the same symptoms as them being possessed by an external spirit, if someone is using their spirit and they're incarnated. In that case, they need to do protection magic, whereas if it's an external spirit and there's a change of personality, etc., then you have to do an exorcism to get the spirit out of the person, and then protection magic to keep it out. So when you're doing this kind of work, you always cast circle. Okay, so cast circle, get in sacred space. You want to make sure you don't invoke anything else by accident. Okay, then just sit, calm your mind, and see if you can imagine the universe being like a stream flowing past, where all the memories, the past is just things that you can remember, the present is just things you can't remember, and it's all one and the same, and time doesn't exist, and everything just flows. It's easier to do this sort of meditation in a dead stream, like how you go out in the woods and you see like a bed of rocks that was once a stream. That's a great place, right? At a crossroads, that's a great place. There's lots of places that have spirit. If you have a skull or bones, actually for mine, I bought like what looked like a skull, and then I dissected an owl pellet and melted wax over it in the bottom, so that when I burn candles, it's on top of real bone. But I don't believe in harm. I like harm none. So for me, having a real skull was, I don't know, maybe one day, but I'm still getting over the idea that it's a little icky. But you can call spirits with blood most of the time. That's what you'd use. But you also call them with things like honey, sweets, honey, wine, ale, beer. Any sort of offering for a deity will usually work. It's like a mixture of like what the deities and what fae like and what demons like, the weirdest blend, right? And that makes sense because humans are a little bit of everything too. So why wouldn't we be a little bit of everything in death? But they like strong flavors, spices, carby foods, sugary foods, things that are really representative of the beauty and glory of life. They also like offerings of life energy. So I've actually done seances, if you want to call them that. That's what they technically are, where you invoke a deity, when you invoke a spirit into yourself. That's technically a seance. But so I would do it all the time. Like, I'd be at the gym and I'd be on the treadmill and I'd be like, just like around the elliptical, just like loving it, and I'd just be like, I'm just opening myself to the stream of death, and it flows into me, and I just feel like all these athletes, like as if they're running with me and as if they're living life through me, and then I'm suddenly moving faster and harder than I'm even capable of doing it, and yet my heart rate hasn't changed, and yet my pace has gone up, the resistance has gone up, it's easier, but my heart rate's the same, because I'm using death energy to fuel the motion, and it feels so amazing and invigorating. And then eventually I wanted to vomit, because nausea is a symptom of bringing in too much death energy. So, and from overexertion. So working with death energy is not as weird and abstract as it sounds. It's not like going into, it is going into a graveyard at night and dancing around graves, but it's not like digging up dead bodies and reanimating the dead and whatever they want to show you in American Horror Story, which is like seriously terrible. But hey, it's great also. But it's very fictional. Yeah. So evoking spirit energy means summoning the consciousness of a deceased being. Spirits are the consciousness of the dead. And that's what necromancy is, working with the dead. There are many born mediums. There are many who learn this craft on their own through painstaking effort. If it's not something that comes naturally to you, buy a book. It's good. It's worth every penny. I've bought like 4 copies over the years because I've given them away and needed to buy another one to reference. But the other thing I wanted to mention is when working with death energy, some of the tools are a lot different. So when you're working with life energy, most people use for their wands some form of oak. There's lots of people do lots of different things, but they'll usually use oak. Many use yew. Yew channels death energy better than life energy. So yew is like the oak of death energy workers, people that work with death energy. Bronze replaces iron. Iron is very common for the athame, iron, steel, or silver, and though usually not silver because that aligns with water, so it doesn't make as much sense for a tool that aligns with fire than as iron. But bronze is the common tool when working with death energy. So there sometimes are these, and those are like the 2 really obvious big differences. There are lots of other little association differences. You remember, you're working with the opposite kind of energy, so there's going to be some differences in the associations and all of that sort of stuff. So make sure you cast circle, then just sit and commune and feel for the dead, and go to places that are dead, like go to broken down houses and go in and just sit and remember and realize that everything is a memory. Everything that exists in the past exists only as a memory, and anything can be remembered at any time using your imagination. And as crazy as it sounds, that is quite literally how magic works, is through the imagination. It's not made up. It's your ability as a human being to tap into a world where time and space and reality don't exist. And you can't go there physically, but does that mean that the experiences you have there are not real? If you're not sure of the answer, head on over to our Wicca 101 Abridged series and find out. But otherwise, know that when you're doing spirit workings, it's a lot less about what you see in the spiritual searching shows where you go and like have all these equipment and you're trying to like talk to ghosts, and it's a lot more searching your feelings, understanding the difference between delusion and magic, and being able to keep track of yourself so that you can allow other consciousnesses to filter in and to give you wisdom and guidance. And that's the basis of working with spirits. You'll find it in many different cultures all throughout the world. There's lots of different practices, lots of different techniques, but the fundamental is all the same. We're all connected, and you can find out anything you need to find out through that connection if you tap into the realm of spirit. That's the idea. So I hope that's helpful. I know these are really broad videos, since we don't have time to get into too much detail, but hopefully we'll do a course on this one day as well. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and from everyone here at the Coven of the Open Mind, blessed be.